Hello and welcome again to TravelOz. I'm Greg Granger. It's the home of Australia's Federal Parliament, the High Court, the Mint, the National Gallery, the National Museum and the War Memorial. This is Canberra, which in the local Aboriginal dialect means meeting place, and we're about to explore all of its icons and its not so well knowns shortly. Canberra has some real surprises. We'll fly over the city in a hot air balloon, get to touch the wildlife at the National Zoo, and meet some of Australia's top athletes at the Institute of Sport. That later in TravelOz, after we explore the Houses of Parliament, new and old, and the memorial to 100,000 Aussie war heroes. Also in this edition of TravelOz, we travel in cars from a bygone era to explore the spectacular Great Ocean Road as they celebrate a milestone in its history. And in the Kimberley, we'll join the teams that round up and catch rogue Mickey Bulls. Well, think Canberra, and you're almost certain to think this building, Federal Parliament House, which was built in 1988 at a cost of $1.2 billion. Well, guess what? With that sort of money, they also grassed right over the roof. One, as camouflage, but two, also to allow the general public to walk right over their politicians. This is the very heart of Australia's national government, with this building designed as the physical and symbolic focal point of Canberra and the nation. The grassed roof signifies that the politicians are working for and under the citizens of Australia, with the most striking element being the central flag mast, which towers 80 metres over Parliament. It's an imposing and impressive structure, which was officially christened by Queen Elizabeth II. That's because Australia is still a constitutional monarchy, with politicians from two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives, controlling Australia's parliamentary democracy from right here. One building the new Parliament overlooks is this historic whitewash building just north of Capitol Hill. Well, before politicians marched up the hill to the new Federal Parliament House building, this was the seat of power for 61 years, until 1988. Now it's a museum for political history. Some of Australia's most prominent Prime Ministers operated from here, from Old Parliament House. Sir Robert Menzies, Bob Hawke, and Malcolm Fraser, with Australia's last leader, John Howard, starting his career here. There are paintings depicting the opening ceremony 80 years ago, hanging here in King's Hall. This is where we meet our guide, Brian Leadbeater. So this is King's Hall. This is where all that political lobbying took place with so many famous politicians.
Yes, Greg, the heart of the House, with the Senate to our right, the House of Representatives on our left, and also where the journalists could keep an eagle eye on the comings and goings of the politicians as they interacted and lobbied each other.
And all under the watching eyes here of King George V, who was the reigning monarch at the time that this old Parliament House building was first started.
When it opened in 1927, Greg, yes, he didn't actually come out from England though to perform the opening ceremony. He assigned that duty to his son, later King George VI, but at that time the Duke of York. So that makes George V the grandfather of our current Queen Elizabeth.
The Senate, the upper house of course, with its red look, the red carpets and red leather benches.
Yeah, home to 36 senators when they moved in 1927. That grew to 76 by the time they left in 1988. And of course, the scene of that epic battle between the houses where the Senate blocked supply in this chamber in 1975, of course leading to the downfall of the Whitlam government.
And the Queen opened Parliament 3 times.
1954, 1974 and 1977. And Greg, that's something unique to Old Parliament House. The Queen, the only reigning monarch to have opened Parliament in Australia, 3 times in this chamber, While she did open New Parliament House, never actually opened a sitting of Parliament in that building.
The inner sanctum, the office of the Prime Minister.
Yes, Greg, but only 3 of our Prime Ministers actually used this particular office. Gough Whitlam, Malcolm Fraser and Bob Hawke.
And in all, we had 16 different Prime Ministers occupying this building.
We did, but the original office from 1927 was actually knocked down to make way for extra room. They could allow for extension of the building to add extra office space for the Prime Minister's staff.
The lower house, the House of Reps, the scene of so many great political stoushes.
Greg, yes, verbal stoushes though, not physical, between great leaders like Prime Minister Menzies and his Labor opponents, Cornwall and Evatt, and great orators like Whitlam, face to face with his adversary Malcolm Fraser.
And it was Gough Whitlam, of course, who so famously threw that glass of water over Sir Paul Hasluck, who went on to become the Governor-General.
Yeah, quite ironic really, wasn't it, that Gough doused the man who would be Governor-General when he first became Prime Minister.
If a country is defined by the wars it has fought, then Australia's tribute to a century of international conflict is housed right here in the Australian War Memorial.
Directly opposite Federal Parliament House, as if to remind politicians of the day about the impact of any decisions they make to send Australians to war, the Australian War Memorial.
A moving and enduring tribute to the 102,000 countrymen who have lost their lives fighting in 10 major wars. It's a glimpse of the way ordinary Australians would have lived in extraordinary times, with major exhibits of Australian involvement in the 2 world wars. Our guide is Dennis Stockman.
So here we are in the Memorial's First World War Gallery, more to the point the Gallipoli Gallery, which commemorates Australians in the first major role they fought in, which is the Gallipoli campaign. We've got artefacts such as the artillery here they used, even down to the bugles, artwork and dioramas that show exactly how the battle took place and what happened to the Australians in that experience of war. Casualties from the First World War amounted to about 60,000 Australian men and women. A part of that was just over 8,700 Australians who died on the Gallipoli Peninsula.
The Second World War display features much more technology, such as these German motorbikes.
Well, that's right, and also in the Second World War, it was much more of a global conflict. Of course, at the end of 1941, Japan had entered the war, and Australia, of course, was under direct threat then from the Japanese. And in total, Australia was attacked around 64 times, and about 40,000 Australian men and women had died in the Second World War.
In all, more than 102,000 Australian men and women died fighting to save this country, and this War Memorial pays tribute to all of them.
That's right, we have the Roll of Honour, which bears the name of every Australian man and woman who has died while defending their country. But we're also quite a unique institution as well. We have the Research Centre, which holds Australia's official military history records, and we also have a shrine, which is the Tomb of the Unknown Australian Soldier, and that soldier's been reinterred from a battlefield in Europe for all Australians to mourn their losses.
One of the War Memorial's newest features is the Discovery Zone, where visitors can experience first-hand wartime conditions.
Here's the replica of a trench soldiers would have experienced during the First World War. Periscope from an Oberon-class submarine is used in the Cold War.
And finally, an opportunity to take the pilot's controls on a simulated Vietnam War mission in an Iroquois helicopter. Next time we visit Canberra, close-up encounters with wildlife at the National Zoo. Australia's future Olympians trained at the Institute of Sport. And a flight by hot air balloon high over the city.